The title of my talk is Teaching Learners How to Learn, a Multimedia Approach. So how do we get our students from being disengaged to excited and passionate about learning? We find this problem because students tend to think about too many things when they're in the classroom, whether it be texting or Facebook. The goal is to get the students to focus and to focus over a long period of time. This process of focusing is part of what we call the learning cycle. And in the learning cycle, we can see that there actually are 4 regions of the brain that are involved in this process. And there are 4 different functions that happen in the learning cycle, with the first being gathering. And in the gathering phase, we are actually perceiving or absorbing information through our 5 senses, which are most commonly used are the auditory and the visual. You can see here that the sensory cortexes are not only involved in this particular stage in the learning process. We actually have different regions of the brain that help us to form speech, understand speech, receive auditory as well as visual information. It's also important to note that words and pictures are not received in the brain in the same manner. They're received through 2 different distinct channels. And because they're received differently into the brain, our brain interprets the information differently. We need to give the person time to integrate that information in the working memory and then to process the information and plant the information into our long-term memory. We can do this quite effectively using multimedia because it can stimulate various types of sensory stimuli and in different degrees. We also need to keep in mind that every time we use multimedia to stimulate the brain and activate the learning cycle, we are doing a process called neuroplasticity. And in this process, we're actually activating neurons and integrating neurons so that way the student can actually understand the words and the pictures and make sense of the information. In the next phase of the learning cycle, we have the reflective reflection type of stage. Here, the student focuses on the information for a certain amount of time and then disengages from that information and is given a relaxation mode. Here, the student may get involved in a number of activities, including PE or, for example, sewing or band, anything to change the focus from the particular topic and then re-engage. To make this particular process effective, we cannot give too much information, even though multimedia is an excellent tool. Too much information can overload the working memory, which is quite limited, and prevent long-term storage. A perfect example is lecture duration. If the lectures are too long, student frequency of watching the lectures decreases. So in reflective thinking, the student considers different things, for example, as thoughts and ideals and experiences of what they've learned and how to put those particular ideals and thoughts into a better useful understanding. 2 examples of ways to consider reflective learning as, for example, changing from focus to relaxation during exercise or during sleep. Scaffolding is another technique used in reflective learning, and here the instructor helps the student become progressively an independent learner, and they do so by teaching the student skills in reflective learning, encouraging students to exercise, encouraging students to have healthy sleep habits, encouraging students to change their focus during their study time. And as a result, the student becomes, in theory, a better prepared student, being able to ask themselves, for example, what strategies work best for my preparation for exams. In the next phase, which is the creation phase, this is the higher order part of the learning process. And here the student actually forms new ideals and new plans. We can see this actually being played out through expert chess players compared to novice and beginning players. Here, if you place the chess pieces in exact positions every time, you can notice that the expert players actually had an advantage because they actually thought out the particular strategic steps to perform better every time. And compared to the novice and beginners, they didn't have the knowledge, didn't have the time to think about these particular ideals, and did not perform as well, even though you place the pieces in the same spot each time. Now, when you consider randomizing the pieces and changing the order completely, now we can see that there was really no difference between the experts and novice and beginners. in their advantages in the particular game, suggesting then that putting things in certain orders or chunking information and giving the students time to process the information will then help us to create new ideals through the executive planning functions of the brain. This theory then carries over again the creation theory for how we, for example, take that ideal of building new thoughts and interconnecting those thoughts with the old prior thoughts. And this is, of course, the foundation of brain plasticity and how we're reshaping the brain to think differently about a concept. 3D printing is an excellent type of tool that not only involves auditory, in some cases in visual, but also tactile senses that is very good in using strategic thinking, as well as, for example, even going as far as the next process, which is actually active learning. So how do we incorporate all of these types of steps into the classroom? Traditionally, the classroom is for a lecture, and then we send the student home with homework. One tool is to use flipped classrooms in which the student then reads the lecture at home and does the work inside the classroom, keeping the student engaged. So in active learning, active testing, here we're using motor cortex, in which the student now takes those new ideas and plans and put them into action. And we can see that this actually is an excellent idea, because as students do things, they learn things. Of course, assuming that we have done all the different steps of gathering information and moving throughout the learning cycle. Another way to integrate the information into active learning is to include storyboards or group discussions. In summary, we can do a number of types of techniques to produce the independent learners, but the key is also to reduce the cognitive load, and then also to transfer the responsibility of studying to the student, encourage spaced learning, which is the focus in the relaxation step, and then consider different things like the flipped classroom as a non-traditional class structure. Thank you.